There's a really buoyant market out there for people wanting that experience, because sometimes you need experience to get that training contract or to get those further opportunities. So you usually find a wealth of people, really good high quality candidates that want to apply. Essentially, you use free tools out there like LinkedIn or Milkround, or there are sites that you can get in with universities and conglomerates of universities that get your ad out there.
Hi everyone, welcome to today's panel discussion on how legal can successfully partner with sales. I'm Melissa with Lawtrades. In case you don't know us, we allow busy GCs to do more with less by providing flexible remote legal talent. We have an amazing panel today with some excellent legal leaders. I'm going to pass it off to them to do a quick intro. Natalie, I'll turn it over to you.
Sure. Hi there, everybody. So my name's Natalie Salunke. I'm currently the General Counsel of a company called Zilch. You may have heard a lot going on in the buy now, pay later space. I noticed there's a frenemy of mine from Klarna here. So hopefully you'll hear some really interesting takes on growing legal teams, especially with that international dimension. I've been running legal teams for the last 11 years now, actually. And so of all varieties of sizes, whether it's in large organizations that are listed or startup scale-ups as well. So I'm really looking forward to sharing some of my insights with you.
Thank you. Johanna, I'll let you jump in.
All right. Yes. Hi, Johanna Carlsson here from Stockholm. I work at Klarna and have been with Klarna for about 4.5 years now. But in my current role as head of legal for the past 9 months or so, I stepped into this role in June last year. After a little bit of a roller coaster at the company as well. We have a team of 130 lawyers in total, of which about 30 are in compliance, and they are spread out over different regions and offices. Before joining Klarna, I've been in other in-house positions and a law firm, and also worked as a lobbyist for a few years early on in my career. Wasn't very successful, so I've left that behind now. But joined Klarna as an individual contributor and then taken on different leadership roles during this year or during the time at Klarna. Looking forward to this conversation.
Wonderful. Graeme?
Yeah, thanks. Hi, everyone. My name's Graeme Barron, currently head of legal at a company called GWI. GWI is a market research and data business. We run lots of consumer surveys, aggregate all of that information, pull out consumer insights, bundle it all up in a SaaS platform and sell it to various companies around the world. I started GWI not so long ago, about 1 or 2 months ago. Feels like about 10 years, but scale-ups generally do. Really enjoying it. I inherited a team of 9, so relatively smallish, not all lawyers. We have a sort of range of paralegals, non-legal professionals, and legal counsels. Prior to GWI, I was head of legal at Trustpilot, and prior to that, Skyscanner. So I had a bit of experience of scale-ups over the past sort of 10 years or so.
Wonderful. Well, excited to have you all here today. We'll go ahead and kick it off with talking about how you decided to make your first legal hire and what prompted you to make that hire. Natalie, I'll kick it back to you.
Sure, and I just realised I didn't actually sort of comply with the brief at all. So what I didn't tell you is that my current legal team is really small. It was 3, it's now back down to 2. I'm in the fintech space, and I'm sure, as Johanna will mention for Klarna, there's been a lot of sort of restructuring in that space recently. And I'm based in London. So I guess, sort of thinking about the first legal hire, I think it does vary depending on the organisation that I've worked at and the culture of that organisation and where it is in its life cycle. So I think the key for me has been how you get that conversation in there about negotiating headcount and budget. In some roles, I've actually negotiated that before even starting as the head of legal or general counsel, and it's sort of a package deal, as it were. So I want to make sure I'm getting the access or commitment to those resources, and some of that can be a team and headcount as well. What I've tended to do is hire on the more junior end. And the reason I think, especially when you're in a scale-up startup where there is a small legal team, is the business is still getting used to the concept of what a legal team is. And they already think that they've invested a lot of money in hiring a senior lawyer, especially if you are that head of legal or general counsel. So really trying to get the data points to support, that team build, as it were, and that first legal hire, if you haven't had the ability to create that narrative before joining, is really important. So, I've looked at sort of paralegal trainee level roles and trying to get those into support, because generally I need a little bit of help with the kind of more administrative, more junior sort of legal work. If I can't, then I found a really kind of interesting way of getting talent in, but also giving back to the legal community. Has been running internship programs. So generally I'll come in, I'll do one at this organisation as well. The idea is hiring a number of different interns over the summer. They could be law graduates, they could be still sort of studying, and getting them in to sort of assist with some of that, I guess, ultimately data mapping, some of those more sort of junior tasks. And ultimately what that gives me is a bit of a talent pool that if I do want to then hire sort of more permanently, I've then got some really good people who I've already kind of tested out in the process. So I think having that junior there helps you kind of do that mapping, which sometimes a more senior lawyer wouldn't be open-minded to. I do think it depends on the mindset that you're hiring. And then, you do want people that are eager to kind of get stuck in, especially when it is a legal team that's more in that infantile type state.
Quick question before we move forward, Natalie, in setting up that internship program, have you found that quite easy from company to company?
Yeah, definitely. I think I've just got a blueprint that I've probably carried around with me for over 10 years now, but essentially, there's a really buoyant market out there for people wanting that experience, because sometimes you need experience to get that training contract or to get those further opportunities. So you usually find a wealth of people, really good high quality candidates that want to apply. Essentially, you use free tools out there like LinkedIn or Milkround, or there are sites that you can get in with the universities and conglomerates of universities that get your ad out there. And then generally, the statistic I've got is I did the internship kind of hiring in my last role. We had 250 applicants over the weekend after go live of our ad. So it's not like you're not going to get some really interesting, talent there. The problem is you've almost got too much demand for it, and you can't always give everybody the opportunity to get that opportunity.
Absolutely, that makes sense. Johanna, what's been your experience?
So when I joined Klarna, we were already about 30 people in the organization, but then we've grown to 130 or so. So of course, when we add business units, we launch new products, or we enter into new markets, these questions pop up. And I think in the beginning, when we were a smaller team, if you will, we were really focusing on senior people who could be, work very independently and sort of hit the ground running. But as we've grown, the team is also much more distributed, and I think that brings value and increases how people grow and find their work as lawyers at Klarna, both for the more senior people, who then can also develop their leadership skills and help junior talent develop, and of course be relieved of some of the more administrative or repetitive tasks. One thing that I've noted over time is that instead of focusing so much on skills, I'm much more focused on the personality and maybe their background, what type of companies they've been at, and how they appreciate change. We all say that we're in agile environments, and I think most people these days market themselves as adaptive and one looking for change. But at Klarna, the role that you get hired for might not exist once you join. We constantly, as Natalie also alluded to, there are constant reorgs. So if you're only focused on the specific role and sort of the reporting lines, Klarna will likely not be the best company and fit for you. I myself had I think 5-6 different roles over these 4.5 years. I've reported to C-level, and then to less senior manager, and then up again, and it just goes a little bit in waves. we say for all our hires that we sort of step off the straight line when we join Klarna. So really just being open-minded in that way. And those are the people who tend to stick around. So I think it's really like a way to find a good match for both, to see if it's the right environment. It's not for all lawyers. But and one other thing, and I would also like to hear more about this internship program and the administrative or the more sort of easier tasks. But my first question to the business when they come and ask for a lawyer is really trying to drill down on whether it is legal tasks that they are looking to solve, or whether it could maybe be a delivery manager or product manager or some other like administrator that could do it much better typically than a lawyer. So just making sure that we hire lawyers for legal tasks and use other resources that are much better at, for example, project management than at least I am.
Graeme, what's your take?
Yeah, so very, very similar stories really. In terms of GWI, it was quite clear to me where the team were spending a lot of their time, and I think often it presents itself in terms of you can sort of see what's in fire and what's taking up the day-to-day, especially with senior lawyers who need to pull themselves up and actually look at the more sort of strategic, complex work. So for me, similar to what Natalie was saying, think about sort of the junior end of the resource around sort of paralegals. Can you get somebody in who will help sort of free up your more senior lawyers' time and look at things like sort of admin tasks that we're doing? So for me, it was immediately obvious that we have a sort of share scheme at GWI, which just wasn't very well managed, and my lawyers were getting bogged down into real admin tasks of granting shares, dealing with our share platform, managing our cap table. So for me, it was immediately obvious I needed a paralegal to come and take that ownership away from the more sort of senior lawyers. So we've just gone out and hired for that and currently advertising it now. I was sort of chuckling when you said the number of applications, Natalie. We advertised our paralegal role. Within 2 hours, we had 200 applicants, and I couldn't believe it. I just thought, how on earth are we going to manage to sift through all of these applications? So there's a huge amount of resource out there and great talent who I think can help you, navigate the B2B BAU work whilst getting great experience for them, but give you a bit of time to think about your senior hires. Because for me, if I'm taking somebody on from a senior perspective, I really want to scope the role out and take a bit of time to do that. So I think initially hiring paralegals and more junior lawyers first can allow you to buy that time to do that.
Perfect. A question to pose to all three of you. When you're making those hires, are you having to go to management and prove the value of those legal hires, or how do you go about showing the business the value of bringing on additional folks within the legal department, whether that be a lawyer or a non-lawyer position?
Yeah, I think it's really important, and tracking value is really important to your business case ultimately, because you've got to speak the language of the business to get them on board. I think a lot of businesses think that lawyers come in and then want to build an empire. So there is a little bit of well, hang on, we've just hired a really expensive lawyer, now you want more people. I think it's really important to look at the type of work that's coming in and categorize it and get that data. So you can say, hey, I'm X lawyer and you're paying me X amount to do this. But actually, is it a really good use of resources and time? And ultimately, it does need to get done. You recognize there's a commercial need for it, but perhaps I'm not the best person to do it. And actually, if you're sending all of this work externally, that's a lot of money. And maybe having somebody who can cover some of the more junior roles, etc., and some of that work that's a little bit more commoditized just makes more sense. But I think the key is data, ultimately, and getting that business case in a language that your business actually hears you, rather than deigning as a lawyer, sort of saying, I need this. And it's like, well, hang on, how many other departments in the organization would just get budget for new headcount? You've got to play the game, ultimately.
Klarna, I would say we have flipped it around. And so the business units, they are responsible for their KPIs and their deliverables. And they are also the ones determining what type of resources they need to get there. And there is a fundamental understanding that in a regulated business, you need a certain amount of lawyers to get there. So the heads of the business units typically come to us and say, we need a lawyer to support us in releasing this new product, for example. But then, of course, you need to figure out what type of lawyer and so on. But I would otherwise say that the lawyers in the organization are also the best marketers for more, because if they are really supporting the business and driving the business forward, then that will sort of come natural that in order to grow further, we need even more legal talent to facilitate and speed things up.
I think from my perspective as well, is also look at what you're spending externally. Certainly when I've been in other roles or come into this role, and you see that a lot of the low level work is being outsourced, which, you know, can easily be dealt with via, you know, your in-house team, which is a huge kind of cost saving. And I think comparing that kind of cost benefit analysis of bringing it internally as opposed to what you're spending externally is quite a helpful way to present that to a CFO. And it's certainly what I've done in the past. You know, even just kind of working out the number of hours that they're spending on particular tasks and working out what that might look like from an external law firm's charges, you know, it's quite a sort of evident and quite a sort of useful mechanic to be able to kind of justify that higher.
Absolutely. And that kind of piggybacks off of our next topic here. You know, scaling a legal team doesn't always have to be about adding headcount necessarily. Are there ways that you have found really helpful to work smarter by utilizing what you currently have versus adding headcount? Natalie, I'll flip it back to you.
Yeah, sure. So I think, as I alluded, I mean, I'm getting the data, and that's really important. So I have actually tracked, I don't want to use the word recorded time, but I have tracked what the time and what we're spending it on, and then categorize what it is that we're doing. So once you have that data, it's much clearer to have that picture as to, should we be doing it? Should we actually outsource it? Also, is it like interesting work with the team as well? And I think we talked about, you know, sort of getting the team to do simple tasks potentially rather than sending externally, but equally, how do we save the sexy stuff for the team if they do have the ability to do that, and how do we allow them to grow? So you're looking at the, I guess, individual needs and desires of your team. I think first and foremost, what have you got? Are they performing well? And if so, how do we reward them for being loyal to the company? And how do we make sure we're going to get the best out of them, but ultimately help them to grow and be the lawyers that they want to be? So what resources can we give our team to get the best out of them? So you are looking at improved processes. You are looking at tech tools out there. They're not necessarily legal tech tools. I think also, you know, leveraging what the organization already has. Yet again, speak the language of the business, look at the type of organization it is. How can you, as a business unit, utilize the resources that are available to other business units to better do what you need to do? And so, yeah, if you've got a big budget, etc., you know, maybe you can invest in a load of people and throw technology at things. But actually, sometimes it's about kind of looking at what you've got and leveraging, you know, what you have and making the best out of it as well.
Absolutely. Graeme, any additional feedback to add on that topic?
Yes, certainly in relation to legal technology, I've been quite fortunate at GWI to have inherited a legal technologist in my team who is a non-lawyer from a banking background. And she's amazing at just efficiency and thinking in different ways that lawyers maybe sometimes don't think. And just looking at things from a pure process point of view around how do we make these things as efficient as possible internally, you know, particularly in relation to contracting processes. And that might not be a fancy new system or tool. It's just really sort of honing down on how do we make processes much more efficient. And we've kind of now created almost kind of like a machine of contracting where we have our whole contracting piece managed by our legal technologist who utilizes our paralegals to deal with the day-to-day contracts of renewals, easy, you know, turnarounds, contracts that are on our terms, but then we only scale up to escalate to lawyers if there are particularly complicated deals or there's a, you know, kind of something on third-party paper, and that's been a game changer for us. So I think sort of thinking about legal technologists and skill sets that you don't necessarily immediately jump to when you're scaling your legal team.
Absolutely. Johanna?
No, I can only agree, and also note that us lawyers, we are probably good at sort of describing what is frustrating to us and what is taking up a lot of time. But to your point, Graeme, having someone in legal ops, not either with the paralegal or legal background, but maybe more like process oriented, interested in tech, and we have someone who can also code a bit. He was a GC in a former life. Now he pretends not to be a lawyer, and he helps us with all sorts of legal ops hacks using, Google Docs and other things that the organization is already using, but facilitating and speeding things up and optimizing in a way that we would not even think it's possible. So I really think that the key here is also to leverage and that's what's so nice with being in a business rather than a law firm. I think that there's so much talent and different competences out there, that if you describe your problem to your colleagues, then they will most likely have much more or better solutions to come up with, or ideas, than you would think of yourself.
Absolutely, I agree, especially when you're trying to scale really efficiently. Utilizing all the internal resources that you can is incredibly helpful. Along that same note, you guys have all mentioned tools and using different types of tools that are already in place within the company, but also possibly adding a new resource. Are there tech tools that you have found that super helpful to work smarter, or different ways to implement those?
Yeah, I feel a bit bad going first. So Johanna and Graeme, if you want to go in.
You're at the top of our notes, so just
I know, before I take all the good points, but I think there's a lot of thoughts on this. I think, look, we've all got used to using knowledge management tools like LexisNexis or Practical Law, and I think that's the given that I think that's the first business case, that if you do come into a team and you're relatively new, just get that as part of the negotiations of joining, because it's just good to have there, especially if you're on your own and you don't want to have to try and ask law firms or friends to kind of loan you templates. Contract negotiation tools can be quite useful if you do have a lot of standard templates that you set up and quite sort of low value or quite sort of basic negotiations where you're not expecting the law to change. So I've used platforms like Juro for that in various different organizations. I think there's also, as I said, internal tools that you may already have, like Jira for ticketing systems. You could create a kind of a legal sort of front door by having a ticketing system that is similar to what your IT teams would use. Or if you've got customer services, there are probably already tools within your organization that could help. I think we're really lucky that a lot of the cloud solutions out there, like Microsoft Teams and G Suite, are quite sophisticated now and allow that kind of ecosystem that gives you that visibility across different departments, allows you to work on real time in documents. I think that can be really sort of useful. So I think the key here is not just going, I want some shiny legal tech, because there's loads out there, which actually can get quite overwhelming, but actually doing that gap analysis and going, what is the problem you're trying to solve? Is there anything within your organization that could help and assist? Because even if you have a 1.0 version, that's going to give you the data to go, hey, you know what, I have tried the internal tools that exist, but it's lacking X, Y, and Z, and therefore I do need to go to a specialist provider. So that's how I kind of get on my tech journey. And ultimately, when I'm looking to partner with tech providers, it's those that are kind of thinking in that innovative way, and a kind of, you can grow with your tech provider, especially in the legal space, because a lot of it is still quite kind of new. How do you get on that journey with them? Help them perhaps with feedback to their actual tools and what they're kind of trying to create for their wider customer base, whilst leveraging kind of those lower prices as well.
Graeme, what's your take on this?
Yeah, I think definitely try and be clear on the problem you're trying to solve, as opposed to just thinking you need a shiny new tool, because often the simplest solutions are the best. And we've just gone through a very similar situation at GWI when we come in is around contracting and that sort of efficient machine I was talking about earlier. We were thinking, do we bring in a new CLM and sort of look at it all singing, sort of dancing tool? And actually we got to the point of really what we were trying to solve was just a way to triage and a way for the business to contact us, and also for the business to have visibility on where the status of contracts. And we ended up in a position where that really is just a legal front door, and it's it's ultimately a kind of ticketing system. And we have just implemented a legal front door called Tabled, and it's super great, really slick and a nice interface, but very simple. And what that allows the business to do is easily raise requests to us. It integrates with other tools as well, so you can fit into existing workflows. But most importantly, it gives our our sales reps visibility on where all of their matters are at any one time. So it means that we're not constantly getting chases from the sales teams on, where are our contracts, what's happening with this. They can go in and log into the portal and ultimately see all of the activity on there. And it's allowed our team to kind of triage contracts much easier than we were doing in the past. And the visibility of the reps was quite manual before, where we were producing spreadsheets and having to sort of send it to them and update the spreadsheets, whereas this is all kind of in real time. And for me, that was a big sort of change for us, that we decided, let's not go down the route of a full sort of CLM yet, because the real problem we're trying to fix is just very small sort of aspects of that. So I definitely recommend Tabled if anyone's thinking of a legal front door. It's a useful tool.
Good to hear. Johanna?
Interesting. No, I'm a little bit burnt. We spent quite a lot of time adapting a contract automation tool to our standard sales contract, which as the lawyers who spent time on this, while it took much more time than I could ever have imagined, we were quite happy with the result, where you would get out a completely sort of bespoke global contract with the regional terms that were applicable only to the regions that were in scope, with right pricing and so on. But it turned out that our business developers just found it or not intuitive enough to use. There were a little bit too many questions to be answered and connections to be made before the contract popped out. So now we're back to our template gallery that we provide them in Google Doc, where we have multiple different versions, so they can sort of pick and choose which version is best for them. But I haven't given up. I'm sure there will be a way to sort of combine this, but also knowing that I think the partner you choose, as both Natalie and Graeme describes, is very important. That you need someone who is willing to work with you and to find a solution that works for a long term or for the foreseeable future. So you don't need to redo all the work in 6 or 12 month time. I think that's sort of my key lesson. But right now I'm focusing a lot on finding cool AI tools that can help us review and revise contracts, for example, and speed that up. I think maybe a little bit too early to really find cost-efficient tools that are also working well, but super excited to see what the future will bring.
Just going on the back of what Johanna said as well, ChatGPT, I do think is going to be a bit of a game changer. I know Alan and Overy recently have kind of quite publicly gone out there and said they are leveraging that technology to create solutions, but I think it does give you sometimes, if you're struggling to find where to start or begin when you've got a problem, or you just got a bit of a brain freeze or a word block and you can't kind of articulate yourself, sometimes just having something like that to kind of just get your brain flowing can be quite useful. So I'm really excited about that technology and how it's going to potentially have some impact on the legal tech world in particular.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I've encouraged my team to start playing around with that, and particularly as you say, as a starting point of, look, if you're doing a bit of research and you're particularly kind of stuck, it might be a place to start. Or as you say, if you're crafting a piece of advice to the business, good tool to kind of leverage. But certainly it's not a replacement of lawyers or a replacement of proper advice and proper kind of research, but it is a nice place to start, and I certainly think it can only get better. So yes, it's definitely one to play around with. Fortunately, so far, ChatGPT's answer to "Can I exchange my legal team with ChatGPT?" is no. Keep them, keep them for now. That's good.
Very interesting how all this technology shifts and changes, and how important it is to pay attention to and really do some research and figure out what the best options are for your team. Kind of shifting gears a little bit, How do you go about growing a global legal team? And, what's important to that structure? What are different types of lawyers across different types of regions, depending on the business growth that you have to focus on? And then, when you do go into those interviews, what are key important things that you use to interview? Is that, having someone mark up a document prior to hopping on a call with them, and what does that look like? I know that's a big question. So Johanna, I'll turn it over to you. I know we've talked about a global team a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. We have people in almost all time zones. I have one in Australia and a few on the US West Coast, but most of the lawyers in the team is based either in Europe or on the US East Coast. But it is, of course, different. I mean, the culture only in Europe is quite different. UK compared to Sweden, also German lawyers. We have different backgrounds. So also just understanding like what are the base qualifications to become a qualified lawyer in a certain market, and how does that work? Just being able to sanity check. Once you've grown a bit and you have in-house lawyers in that market, you can of course utilize your own team to help screen those basic requirements. But as I mentioned, for me, what has sort of shifted in my mind, and I think this is something that everyone can, also if you're looking for a job, something to think of is really the cultural fit, more than maybe the perfect matching of skills. Because I think at the end of the day, it's about whether you really want to be there or not. And if you do, and if you like your colleagues and you are engaged in the business, you're interested in the products, then you will also contribute with the legal advice you provide. Whereas if it's not the match, then it will just create friction. It will take time and effort for the team that is trying to onboard someone who is not really fitting into the team. And that is not to say that everyone needs to be the same, rather the opposite. And one thing that has really helped us is that in Sweden, you can call yourself a lawyer, in-house lawyer, not an advocate, but a lawyer, regardless of if your qualification is from South Africa or from the US. It's not like the word lawyer is not a protected term. And you can provide in-house advice. And that means that we can hire people from all over the world that are, for some reason, in Stockholm, as the company language is English. As long as you're fluent or more or less fluent in English, then Swedish, for example, is not a requirement at all. So I think we have been able to offer positions to very skilled and great lawyers who find themselves in Stockholm for one or the other reason. I mean, we know it's not the weather. It's something else that have brought them here. But then we get to benefit their skills, whereas a lot of other employers here would not be able to offer them a job because, people speak Swedish or they are maybe more narrow-minded. So that's also something that I would like to throw into the mix, just thinking a little bit outside the box as to what profile you're looking for.
I can't agree with you more, working for a company that sources flexible remote talent to be able to find the right skill set, how important that is and how nice it is to find that, in multiple locations throughout the world. So Natalie, what's your take?
So growing a global sort of team, I think when I've kind of managed global teams, I think it sometimes depends what you've inherited. So I think, I always try and build my teams around what I've already got, as I said, because I think that's really important. The people that are there feel as though you're not coming in and just trying to shake everything up for your own ego or because you've got some grand design as to how you should do something. You've really got to work with what you've got. Equally, you've got to look at what the needs of the business are that you work with and how that is structured and organized. So, if I think about when I was at Enterprise Rent-A-Car, we did have our kind of different offices in different countries, but because ultimately it comes down to, I think, trust as well, and where the skill base or the market for those type of individuals with those skills actually live. So do you want somebody who is a German or French qualified lawyer that's based out of London where you are, so you've got them close to you? Although having said that, we are working more remotely, so I think we're less precious about that FaceTime or proximity, because I think we've all adjusted to how we actually get the best out of somebody remotely. But do you have somebody who's actually with the business in that country that is going to be naturally having that more affinity to that business or that particular office? How do you make sure that they still have the interests of the group or the interests of the legal function at heart, and aren't just trying to sort of placate the people that they're sort of closest to on the ground? So I think that personality, as Johanna was saying, is super, super important. You want somebody that has that kind of propensity to sort of step up and be quite independent in terms of how they operate, but also understand the politics and where their allegiances really should lie, and what their kind of subtle role is in that, to make sure that ultimately they are upholding the right behaviours as part of the organisation. And so, one of the difficulties as well can be with having that global team is, how do you create that sort of sense of togetherness, and that we're all part of the same team? I think you do have to invest a lot more on that kind of hybrid approach, thinking about those ways to get everybody together. Do you have a legal conference where you fly everybody over together? Do you do those monthly kind of meetings? Do you showcase different people in those different countries or organisations, so that people feel like whatever level or whatever country they're in, there is utility in being part of a larger ecosystem? Because otherwise it's quite easy to slip into that kind of siloed mentality. I think my final point is, a lot of people come in, especially those who've been in private practice a while. I was quite fortunate. I moved in as an NQ back in 2009 to my first in-house role. So I hadn't been too indoctrinated in the private practice way of having a natural legal private practice hierarchy. I think trying to replicate that model within an in-house environment, I don't think is very smart. And, I think a lot of people don't like sort of feeling as though you've kind of are part of a mini law firm within an organisation. So I think just bearing those things in mind as you're kind of designing your legal team is really important.
Graeme?
Yeah, again, I think it comes down to the needs of the business, and there's definitely not one obvious solution. It's really your perception of what works best for the business. And I think every organisation I've ever been in who has say a US arm or a Singapore arm, they always want somebody on the ground, and they always think there needs to be someone there. But you have to think carefully about that piece of do they need to be on the ground, or is it actually just serving the time zone? And can you do that from a centralized location? And there's always that balance between centralization and decentralization, of getting everyone in one place and making them feel part of a legal team, but also the business ultimately wants somebody to be able to go to immediately. And as Natalie was saying, I think if you are going to put somebody in location, they need to be a really strong individual. So I tend not to want junior lawyers in that particular position, because they can be heavily influenced by, say, the commercial teams, where it's not necessarily a bad thing to have a good relationship, but you want them to be able to push back and ultimately recognize they're there to look at risk for the business within the context of a legal team. So I think for me it's thinking seriously about, is it the fact that you need somebody strong on the ground, or do you need to just satisfy the time zones and be able to answer queries and restructure or rearrange your team so that some of your team might work sort of slightly later and might cover US time zones or Singapore time zones, whatever that may be.
So now that you've figured out how to hire, how do you go about retaining the talent in this current market? Natalie?
Look, so I think I'm probably going to say something that's a little bit controversial, but ultimately I don't think we should be obsessed about retaining people for the sake of keeping people. I think, yes, we want to kind of retain the best talent, but also sometimes the best talent is the most ambitious talent. And you may be in an organisation where there isn't going to be that opportunity for them to grow in the way that they want to. So I think the key is that while you've got somebody, create that environment in which they can thrive. And hopefully they'll stay, because it is a great environment. I think, as Johanna was alluding to, getting those people that are just happy, great. But, sometimes you aren't going to be the be all and end all to somebody in their career. I also think it has become more common for people to change roles every couple of years. And so actually, probably we should be saying, if we have somebody for a couple of years, we've probably done okay. And actually, we should be all right with that. And we should be comfortable that people do want to change, rather than trying to fight a losing battle, which is keep people for as long as possible. Might not be the best thing, actually, even in the interest of the team either, because sometimes a fresh injection of blood and talent can be, quite good. I think it's really important, therefore, to know your team members as individuals. and what motivates them, what they're trying to achieve, what their career is about, and how you as a leader and almost as a coach can help them achieve that. And it may be in the guise of being part of the same organization, but by having those honest conversations, you can probably work out whether that person is in this for the long term or not, because ultimately you're being quite transparent about, they're being transparent about what they want, and you're being transparent about what you can provide. And if there's going to be a gap, you can kind of see on the horizon at some point in time, this person may even outgrow the organization. So I think it's about getting value from people while they're here. And also that legacy, because when people move to different places, you know, your reputation will still kind of live on through having helped them get to where they you know, need to get to. I think, look, there is an issue with the talent market right now being quite expensive. Lawyers are getting more and more expensive. Unfortunately, and I don't know if Graeme and Johanna feel this, at least in the UK market, it doesn't mean we're getting paid loads more. It just means that a lot of junior lawyers are kind of expecting the salaries that we're commanding ourselves, which, you know, that bubble's got to burst at some point. But then, you know, how do we sell what it is that we do? Well, we are in a much more commercial environment. There are more business opportunities to move into different lateral roles that aren't necessarily law. Maybe we do get a better life balance. I'm not sure that's always, you know, the case, but I think it's about what are the positives of what we've got in our ecosystem, and not, you know, it's not going to be for everybody. And so it's trying to marry those desires or abilities up with the people that are kind of, you know, coming to you or a part of your team.
Absolutely. I think that's a wonderful perspective to bring to the table. Johanna, what's your take?
I agree. I mean, people move more quickly now than ever, probably. And it's up to everyone to sort of decide when it's time to leave. And there's no, I mean, there shouldn't be any hard feelings about that. But then again, of course, you want to make sure that people who are with the organization, that they feel connected and that they sort of are integrated in the business, so that they can also contribute as well as they can. And when I joined Klarna, I thought we had so many meetings. And I just felt like, why are we wasting so much time on, you know, sitting in meetings and talking about, you know, both business planning, but also more like personal stuff. But over time, and not least when COVID hit, it was really, I think, key that we had that meeting culture where we knew each other and we were used to meeting over video. And not only talk about work, so that we retain the relationships and the connection with each other. Because at the end of the day, yes, I think giving people the opportunity to develop as a lawyer or in their professional role, that's absolutely key to retain lawyers. Otherwise, they will go somewhere else if they find that they will develop more and, you know, work on more exciting projects. But it's also like, if the paycheck should not be the decisive or only decisive factor, then there needs to be other reasons to stay, right? And for me, it's like all the great people that I get to spend time with every day. So really like giving the opportunity to develop those relationships. We've also had like puzzles and online games with the organization, so that, you know, you get to spend time and have fun with colleagues, even if they are spread out in various offices or in their remote home offices, just to also get that in. And then the upside of that is also that you become so much more efficient. You can reach out to, you know, whoever you've spent time solving a puzzle with and ask for professional advice. Like, have you done this before? You know, just reaching out and get help from each other in a much more efficient way than if you need to find whoever that was who sits in that part of the business and maybe they have done this. So also just you know, speed up the communication around work topics.
Absolutely. Building the culture is huge. Graeme?
Yeah, just maybe to pick up on that, I think for me, it's not getting too hung up on things you can't control. So, you know, ultimately there will always be roles there which pay mega bucks, and, you know, you have this kind of carrot in front of you. And often as lawyers, I mean, to some extent you can control salary, but often it's determined by bandings within the organization or sort of wider considerations. So for me, you know, if somebody has an offer of £250,000 to go and be a privacy lawyer, then great, go for it. But actually be very open about that. That's one opportunity you have, but be open and transparent about what you can offer. And for me, it's about, you know, making sure you create an environment which is, you know, fun to work in. The individuals are growing as lawyers. You know, you're able to offer really strong quality work and tailor that to the way those lawyers want to develop, or non-lawyers as it may be, and not get too worried about trying to compete on you know, what others might be able to offer in the industry. And I think if you're really open about that and you have a conversation with your team, and you know, I think, as they were saying before, have an expectation that people will move on and will develop in other areas. So create an environment where they can have a good time while they're here and do a good job for you. And you know, allow them to move on if that's the case, because as you say, you can then redo that process, bringing some fresh energy to the team, and not get too worried about things you can't control.
Absolutely. Last question. What has been your best hire and how did you utilize them? Whether, you know, this is your current role or throughout your career, what has been your best hire? Natalie?
You probably can already guess this, but definitely I think some of my best hires have been at that paralegal or intern level, where you can see where they've got that potential. You're getting them at the start of their career, and you know, perhaps they haven't been given the opportunities thus far because they don't have the perfect grades, or they haven't gone to, you know, the top universities, etc. But you can just see that, you know, they just need that foot in the door and their career is going to fly. So, you know, as I said, doing those kind of programs, you do get some exceptional people applying. You know, you do have that bias towards what looks great on paper than brilliant, but I do think there's so much you can do with those people. And then, you know, the kind of gratitude that they have and the keenness to really do a good job. I mean, you can do so much with that as well. And I think then kind of finding those opportunities to train these individuals. So I registered as a training principal back in 2012 when I did my first head of legal role. Now with the SQE, I'm always providing those opportunities for people to count as much as they can in terms of their experience to get them to where they need to get to. So I think, you know, those hires where you're having that open conversation with them, it kind of all fits, and you can see how, you know, you're going to get a load out of this person because they're great, but equally you're going to give so much back to them, and it feels like a really fair and valuable relationship. I think, you know, it's been my sort of most rewarding hires, and, you know, to then see them go on to either law firms and train, or they finish their training in-house and they go to a really good firm for a bit, or they go to an even better organization. You know, it's just really satisfying.
That makes a lot of sense, and, you know, a wonderful way to give back to the community as well, and help those younger professionals grow. Johanna, what's been your best hire?
Everyone. No, but it's hard to say, of course, but or there's no one person I would say, but in general, I get back into what we discussed before. I would say that, and also maybe a little bit similar to what Natalie is describing, those people who may not fit, you know, the perfect or have the perfect CV, but then when you speak to them and you hear their passion, you can identify that they would actually sit really, really good together with this business unit, or working with these challenges, and how they seeing them developing into, you know, becoming more and more senior, more and more independent, start to take on their own reports, and just you know, contributing in so many different ways, also to building that culture, helping out, showing people that it's not only about your own scope, but really also enabling others to succeed. So I would say just this mix of people from different backgrounds, different countries, that in itself creates this magic.
Absolutely. Graeme?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of try before you buy, and often the best hires I've made are individuals I've worked with in the past and just brought with me to new organizations. And I think one in particular was a senior lawyer working at Zilch, and I managed to bring him into my role at Trustpilot as a head of commercial legal role, and ultimately similar to kind of what Natalie was saying about that sort of feeling quite a rewarding experience of bringing somebody in who you would know would sort of thrive in a more sort of senior step up role. It was nice to be able to allow them to make that transition, and ultimately you know that that person will be successful, so it makes you feel a lot more comfortable with a sort of safe pair of hands. And ultimately, as I've kind of moved on, I can sort of see him stepping into the role I left. So for me, that's the sort of rewarding hire. And I think it also gives you the kind of confidence to be able to identify and match the candidate to the role when you've seen them before. So I'm a big fan where you can is, and I guess it links into that previous question about building a culture where people have really enjoyed working with you, because ultimately you might end up getting to hire them again. So for me, that's the kind of most rewarding experience when somebody maybe comes with you in more than one organization.
Absolutely. And that says a lot for, what you're building there when you can bring someone along like that and they come back around. I'd like to thank everyone who logged on to Zoom today, as well as our other virtual platforms. A huge thank you to our speakers, Natalie, Johanna, and Graeme. Thank you for taking the time for this insightful conversation. We're currently working on our next live stream event, so stay tuned for details on that. Thanks.